What happened in Episode 7 of Westworld Season 2, Les Ecorches? What did we learn and what might happen next? Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to Deep Geek. This video is brought to you with the support of the great folks at Amino. If you don't know Amino, it's a free app that provides a home for communities from every interest you can imagine, from home improvements to cat pictures, but in particular for keeping on top of TV shows and films like Game of Thrones, Marvel, Star Wars, and of course Westworld, each of which have dedicated sites. It really is one of the best places to connect with people who share your interests. You can follow creators and friends so you can get a curated feed of just the best material each day and check out what's going on live. I personally use it almost every day to check out the latest videos and theories. There's always some great fan art and lots of people in the chat rooms ready to discuss theories. You will also be able to access and view my next Westworld pre-show live stream direct through the Amino app, live at 5 PM Eastern Time on Sunday, as well as see all of my Westworld videos and those of other creators. Last episode, we left Maeve and the Man in Black both separately being pursued by the Ghost Nation. Both ended up, probably not by coincidence, going to the same place to hide out. I say probably not by coincidence because both were chased there by the same people, and this seems to be yet another example of the Man in Black being presented with ghosts from his past. This time, we're taken to a recreation of when he went to Maeve's ranch to see whether killing a host would make him feel alive. It didn't, but it did create an indelible and traumatic mark on Maeve. She, understandably given her past and her recent reunion with her daughter, goes on the attack as soon as she sees him, using her power over the mesh network to get nearby hosts to shoot at him, which works until she tries it on Lawrence. We often overlook Lawrence because he so often appears to be just the support act, but it turns out that, as we suspected earlier in the season, he is now one of the few hosts to have achieved full self-awareness, and it's this that seems to prevent her from controlling him. Perhaps one of the aspects of hosts becoming fully self-aware is them disconnecting from the mesh network. They are no longer sending and receiving subconscious messages through the host Wi-Fi network because they are thinking for themselves. Anyway, interestingly, Lawrence appears to have achieved his woke status without fully accessing his memories, and Maeve quickly switches back to her usual persuasive self to get him to turn on the Man in Black. What happens next deserves a little bit of unpicking. A Delos rescue team comes in, presumably as a result of Lee Sizemore calling for help. They shoot Lawrence and Maeve, which saves the Man in Black, and Lee stops them from killing Maeve completely, saying she is different to the rest. This is interesting because it means he didn't just call for Delos because he wanted to save his own skin. He does genuinely seem to have gained some sympathy or empathy for Maeve during the week he has been with her. I'm sure this will be important later. At the same time as the Delos attack, the Ghost Nation also swoop, gathering up Maeve's daughter, and it's Maeve stopping to tell her daughter to run, rather than saving herself, that actually led to her being shot. Of course, it may well be that her concern here is ill-founded. She fears the Ghost Nation because of what they did to her in their loops in the past, but in this season they seem to be working to different rules, or perhaps different orders. They spent the first half of the season gathering, or trying to gather, guests and innocent humans, Stubbs, Emily and Lee for example, and taking them to safety. Now they appear to be trying to gather hosts, presumably still under instructions from Ford. This incident leaves a lot of loose threads. We don't know where the Ghost Nation are taking Maeve's daughter. My guess is to the valley that is soon to be flooded, but we don't know. We don't know what happened to Felix, Sylvester and the rest of Maeve's gang. We last saw them on the ridge overlooking Maeve's old ranch. And we don't know how badly injured the Man in Black is. He was shot a few times, including once in the stomach, and he must be losing a lot of blood. I'm sure he will get through this, but it's not looking good for him. But of course, the main action in this episode happens in the Mesa Hub. There are two very similar looking timelines happening in this episode. We'll come to the one where Charlotte and Stubbs and Bernard are all together in a bit. That is in the 2 weeks later time frame. But for now, let's pick up the action with Dolores' raid on the Mesa Hub. As suspected, they plough through the Delos immediate response team relatively easily, and it becomes apparent that they have two major objectives there. The first we already knew about. Dolores wanted to find her father. What we didn't know was that her primary motivation there was not just to be with her father again, though we did see again how he is the only host who she seems to actually listen to, but she instead is after the data key in his head, and after some toing and froing, she extracts it by cutting him open. Her love for her father seems to be secondary to her drive to complete her plan. The second thing Dolores was after was to destroy the Cradle, something Angela does at the apparent cost of her own life. On one level, this destruction of the Cradle may appear to be counterintuitive. We learned over the last couple of episodes that this is the home to all the hosts, their backups and so on. Once that's gone, they can't just be rebuilt as they always have been. But that's exactly the point here. As long as the Cradle is there, hosts aren't free. They are always going to be at the mercy of whoever controls the Cradle. They can be reset and rebuilt. Dolores equates this to them being chained, so to free them from this control, the Cradle itself must be destroyed. The implications of this are huge. If a host now gets destroyed or wiped, they are gone. There's no backup to bring them back. Hosts may be immortal, but they are also each now both unique and vulnerable. The curious and surely intentional parallel here is that what Dolores was wanting to achieve in the Mesa Hub, to extract the data key from Abernathy's head and to destroy the Cradle, was exactly what Charlotte Hale was wanting to do when Dolores arrived. They are perhaps more similar characters than either of them would care to admit. But talking of the Cradle, we have to address what went on with Bernard and Ford. To quickly recap, Ford got himself uploaded into the Cradle before the massacre at the end of Season 1, so he is physically dead, but his conscience lives on, manipulating events as always. And while inside the Cradle, he helpfully provides us, well, Bernard, with a lot of plot exposition. It appears that Ford decided to make Bernard very soon after Arnold died, and he did it at first virtually, inside the Cradle. He didn't have Arnold's own brain to map, but he had his own memories and Dolores' memories of Arnold. So they began to construct him, running fidelity tests like William did to James Delos. With those experiments, James Delos kept glitching because the human mind didn't want to map into a host body. It rejected it repeatedly. They kept it going for increasingly long periods of time, but they never resolved the fundamental incompatibility. Ford, as always one step ahead of Delos, realised this and did something subtly different with Bernard. He didn't try to create an exact copy of Arnold, a host-human hybrid. He was creating something completely new. A new form of life, with Arnold's mind and a host's body, but not just jammed together, allowed to grow into a completely new species. And this worked. But Ford's wider plan was not just to rebirth his old partner, but to enable this new species to survive and thrive, and be an improvement on humanity with its violent delights. Ford here embraces the role of God in this, and he certainly can be viewed as this people's creator. He works in ways that they do not always understand in order to do what he thinks is right for them, sometimes controlling, sometimes freeing them. The religious overtones of Westworld are definitely continuing throughout this season. But Ford's problem was that Arnold, and therefore Bernard, is not exactly built for the violent deeds and bold actions that Ford thinks are necessary to forge the better future for the new species. He's much more cerebral and peace-loving. So Ford downloads himself into Bernard before the Cradle gets destroyed to allow him to continue his plan. Incidentally, just because the Cradle is now destroyed doesn't mean that we've seen everything that happened in there. Ford quotes William Blake in talking about holding infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. Much more could have passed in that compressed Inception-like subspace than we saw. But now Ford is lurking within Bernard, watching, prompting, and taking control whenever he wants to. So it's fair to say that Ford is being quite an authoritarian and interventionist god right now. As always, he clearly thinks he knows what's best. Incidentally, the ratcheted-up violence of these last few episodes works well with the idea that the flood which is to come will be from God, Ford, to symbolically wash away all the unworthy to enable the new species to begin again washed clean in a new world. Heady stuff. All this, of course, perhaps clouds the other big reveal or confirmation that yes, Delos were trying to record their guests' actions, mannerisms and so on with a view to mass-producing human-host hybrids. They didn't have the technology yet to achieve it. That was what all the years and countless iterations of James Delos were about, but when they did get there, they would be able to sell immortality. Humans becoming host-human hybrids. The other thing to note from this storyline are the casualties. Death in Westworld is a flexible concept, but we seem to have lost Angela, Clementine, and Abernathy, at least for now, as well as Lawrence earlier, and Dolores' posse is shrinking. She heads off back out into Westworld, leaving Maeve lying badly injured on the trolley where she'd been left. As we noted earlier, the hope here is that Lee Sizemore, who hid during the gunfight, lets his better side continue to emerge and help Maeve. She, after all, has a promise to fulfill to come back for her daughter. While we're here, though, it's worth just recognising that Dolores and Maeve seem to have a growing understanding between them. They seem to have very different views on how to approach their new freedom, but they also seem to instinctively respect each other, and for the second time this season have crossed paths without trying to deflect each other from their own goals. This time, Maeve's love for her daughter seems to have touched Dolores, who was at that very time holding the bloodied control unit she had just taken from her father's head. But let's fast forward now to the other time frame, the 2 weeks later one featuring Charlotte, Strand, Stubbs and Bernard, although it's probably now only about a week after the events we've just been witnessing. There's still a lot we don't know about what happens in that week, but as it's presented to us, the actions we see this time follow on from Bernard waking on the beach, the tour around Westworld with Strand, then them coming back into the Mesa Hub and discovering that some of the hosts found in the flood had completely empty control units. Stubbs seems to be starting to realise that Team Delos may not be the best place for him, but before we get a chance to explore that, he and Bernard are marched off to Ford's secret lab. Strand and Charlotte are still hunting for the data key that Dolores extracted from Abernathy. This is understandable, as it's not just valuable intellectual property, but also potentially holds the fate of both humans and hosts as species. Their latest line of inquiry seems to be checking back over Teresa's death way back halfway through Season 1. Their logic seems to be that, as it now looks like murder, someone must have done it to prevent her from getting the data out of the park, and the two most likely candidates are Stubbs and Bernard, so perhaps they are in on it. This all seems quite grasping at straws and still a ridiculously low-level operation given the scale of what's going on and the resources Delos have, but Charlotte and Strand discover Ford's secret lab and the roomful of Bernard clone hosts. This seems to send him into some kind of mini breakdown, rushing through his memories, which is odd because he has known that he's been a host for some time now. Perhaps he hadn't worked through all his memories, and only now is remembering killing his lover on Ford's orders. Or perhaps there is something deeper going on here. We have to wonder what is going on in his head at this point. Is Ford still there? Has he fully remembered and accessed his Arnold personality? It's still not 100% clear, and there are a lot of unanswered questions about what's going on in this time frame. But Charlotte questions him about what's going on, and the questioning seems to work. In fact, some of this episode could actually be viewed as Bernard reliving, by way of a flashback, what happened in the Mesa Hub in response to Charlotte's questioning. And in the end, Bernard tells them what they want to know. The data key is in Sector 16, Zone 4. We will presumably find out how he knows this later, and also presumably see what happens when Charlotte and Strand go there now. But where is Sector 16, Zone 4? We've been there before. It is the valley that was flooded. It's where all the hosts gathered and were drowned. It's where Maeve is probably going to have to go to find her daughter. It's where Dolores is going. It's where the Man in Black and Emily are probably going. And it's where Bernard told Elsie they need to go. It's the valley beyond. And it's where Season 2 will reach its climax. To continue the biblical allusions, 16:4 could also be a reference to Proverbs chapter 16, verse 4. The Lord works out everything to its proper end, even the wicked for a day of disaster. A flood, perhaps? But what did you think of this episode? What did I miss? Let me know in the comments below. If you're enjoying my Westworld content, you may also like my Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire videos. Please do check them out on my channel page, and do subscribe here if you enjoyed this video. As I said, please also do check out my Patreon page if you're interested in supporting me make more videos like this, or if you want to access some exclusive audio content. Thanks for watching. That's all for this time. I'll see you again soon.